Okay guys, so I'm going to talk to you today about open-ended questions, open-ended responses, or short answer questions. They all mean the same thing, OEQ, OER, and they're on STAAR, and they're actually a big part of STAAR. So what I mean by that is you're going to have a text that asks you a question. It'll have a little box underneath, and it will say, support your answer with textual evidence. So what are you supposed to do when you have an OEQ or short answer question? In this class, we're going to use APE. So that would mean answer, prove, explain. So if you were to look at those three steps, our answer, or our A, is that you would want to use the title and author in your first sentence and answer every part of the question. So sometimes, for example, an OEQ might ask you about how the tone helps to create the theme for the piece. So that's actually kind of a two-part question, because then you're looking at, well, what is the tone and what is the theme? So in your first topic sentence for your answer, you're going to want to talk about both of those things. You're also going to want to introduce the text and the author. So example, in Daisy by Catherine Klein, the character reveals her relationship with their adopted sister through actions rather than words. So that would be answering a full question, and it's introducing the author and the text, okay? Then if we're looking at our prove, then we're looking at proving it with textual evidence or quotes from the text. So you're not just going to drop a quote in. You don't just want to, put it without any kind of context. So for example, even though she said, "I don't care," when she was asked if she liked having an adopted sister, her love was revealed when she reached down to pat her head and smiled. Well, if you just put, "She loved her sister," and then put a quote, "reached down to pat her head and smiled," end quote, it's not going to be as strong as if you put it embedded as part of a sentence and if you're introducing that quote. So kind of looking at how you can change your verb. So instead of just "even though she said," you could say "she thought" or "she believed," the character stated. So you can look at different ways you introduce quotes, but you have to include one. This is probably one of the most important things. If you don't have text evidence on an OEQ, you can't pass. I hope that you write that down somewhere. If you don't have text evidence on an OEQ, you don't pass. It's huge. So after you've answered and you proved it with your text evidence, then you have to explain how that quote you chose really supports your answer. So you can't just throw in any quote. That doesn't count. You still won't pass if you're just putting a quote from the text. It has to support your answer. So in this example, clearly this shows that even though she pretends not to care, she is grateful to have this new relationship. Well, that goes back to your answer, and it includes your quote, so your quote is showing that. And you can use that sentence stem, clearly this shows, or this demonstrates when you're looking at different verbs. So you can use this if that helps you to do your explanation. So we'll look at some more practice on that, but the other thing we want to look at is crossover OEQ, because it's the same format, but it is different. For a crossover OEQ, you're actually going to have two different pieces of literature. So you might have a poem and a short story, or a short story and an article, or a play and a poem. It's just two different pieces, basically. And you have to look at answering a question that has to do with both of them. So a lot of times it's theme. Like, remember, theme is the author's message or the lesson you're supposed to learn. So a lot of times it's a theme that it's asking you about. So you have to actually include information from both. So how do you answer? Well, if we go to our A, you have to answer all the parts of the question. You're going to still use your topic sentence and make sure we include the title just like we did before. So the proof is where it kind of changes. So now you're going to need evidence from both of them, quotes from both. Remember not to introduce, not just to drop it in, but to introduce the quote. And so with your explanation, you're also going to be talking about how that text evidence shows your answers correct. So it's the same format, but it looks different, and it's going to be longer. I also didn't mention transitions on the other one, and so we've talked about that a little bit, but I want to make sure that you're remembering transitions are not just for essays, but they're also for open-ended questions. So you're using those when you're going from one topic to another. So especially with this OEQ, because you're going to be talking about one piece, like a poem, and then going to another piece, like the short story, you're going to want to put a transition word there. And so I have different handouts that I can give you if you're struggling with transition words. But a transition word could be something like however, although, in addition, Those are all transition words that we've looked at. So you would have your proof from the first, or your quote, for example, from your first one, and then a little bit of commentary or a little bit of explanation, and then you'd have a transition word, and in addition, and then you would have your other quote, and then your explanation or commentary that's going back to connect that to your answer. So it's going to be longer. And then at the very end, you might want to include one last commentary or concluding statement that kind of ties them both together. So usually, like, you're looking at how those two works really relate to each other, and then you might want to restate what you said in your answer or your topic sentence in different words. So let's look at an example, because I know that that's probably pretty confusing. So if you were talking about the theme for Lion King and Finding Nemo, that might be, sometimes we feel guilty for hurting those we care about. So see how this author here has embedded this quote. In The Lion King, Simba states, "You said you'd always be there for me, but you're not, and it's because of me, it's my fault, it's my fault." So you see how here he's putting the quote, but he's introducing it. He's not just dropping it in. And that quote goes back to that theme. It makes sense. It's a good quote. If you were to put in something like Hakuna Matata, and enjoy your life, well, that quote, yes, it's from the movie, but it does not answer your question. It doesn't go with your answer. And then the explanation part, he says this because even though his father died a long time ago, he still feels guilty. Well, that's your explanation or your commentary. Knowing that his father dies, trying to rescue him. And then now we go into a transition in Finding Nemo. Marlin, Nemo's father, says, and now he's got his text evidence here, Nemo, see, he was mad at me, and maybe he wouldn't have done it if I hadn't been so tough on him. I don't know, but now he's gone. And then here we have another explanation. One of the reasons that Nemo's dad is so desperate to find him is because he feels guilty about the way he treated his son. You notice that both of the explanations that are on the bottom of the quotes, they go straight back to your theme. Sometimes we feel guilty for hurting those we care about. And so the concluding statement here at the bottom, both Simba and Marlin. So look at the word both. So both the poem and short story, for example, feel guilty for putting their loved one in harm's way. So that ties them both together. All right, I hope that answered your questions. I hope that you were able to take notes. Remember, you can watch this over and over again for practice if you need it, or you can also ask me in class if you have any questions after watching this. Have a good night. Bye.